I was like, oh, Elizabeth. And there was this really long silence on the line. And she was like, do you mean to tell me that you named your characters in this book after yourself? And I was like, oh no. And at that point, it was too late to change my name, and it was too late to change my characters, so I just kind of had to go with it.
Hello, I'm Veronica Valencia, and I am super happy to be here with all of you today because if you've heard of books like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Vicious, Shades of Magic series, you know our fabulous author, V. Schwab.
Hello. Thank you for coming. Happy to be here. Thank you, Veronica, for chatting with me.
I'm so happy that you're here and I get to chat with you again. We actually just came from a conversation back in New York.
Yeah, I know. This is day 14 of my trials and tribulations and international travels. So I am hanging on by an emotional thread at this point, but so happy to be here. It probably will just mean I have less filter, so I apologize in advance.
One, less filter, not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
And two, you said small thread, which is a
Yes.
great segue into a fragile thread.
Yes.
You could say.
You could say I am hanging on by a very fragile thread at this point. How much power I have, I don't know, but there are fragile threads.
And that is the book that I want to start us off with today, as it is one of your more recent books, which is The Fragile Threads of Power. It is a first book in a new series that encompasses new and old, and you've continued the story of your previous characters while also bringing in new characters. Can you talk about your approach to this new book and series?
Yeah, so if any of you have read more than one of my books, you know that I don't like to do the same thing twice. So embarking on a second arc within the Shades of Magic world was not a thing that I did lightly, because I didn't want it to feel like a redux. I didn't want it to feel like simply a continuation. Not that many readers wouldn't enjoy that, but I wouldn't feel satisfied as the author. So it was halfway through A Conjuring of Light when I realized that I had a door that I didn't want to close all the way. Lila Bard, a character in the Shades of Magic series, makes a deal with the captain of the floating market for a favor. And I realized about halfway through writing that book that I didn't want to call the favor in. I wanted it to be a little door left open. I could have closed the loop, but it would have been a little rushed. It wouldn't have been true justice to it. And it was a small enough thread that I was like, I think I can get away with letting this hang. And then for the next 4 years, every week readers would be like, so did you realize that you didn't close that loop? You know, like Lila never called in the favor. And I was like, yes, I did realize that. Thank you so much. Please hold. And so that favor that needed to be called in was kind of the inspiration for the entire second arc. As for why I wanted to do it, I've always been really interested in making your characters feel like real people. And to that, I mean, I want you as the reader to believe that when you put that book down, those characters don't cease to exist. They continue to exist. You are no longer privy to their journey. And an extension of that is I wanted to understand how characters would continue to grow when I wasn't watching them. And so setting the book 7 years later, the Fragile Threads of Power 7 years after the end of Shades of Magic, was a chance to explore the idea of 7 years is such an interesting time period. It's where we go from a child to an adolescent. It's enough time to go from an adolescent to a young adult, from a young adult to a full-grown human. And so I wanted to explore what it would look like. 7 years is also enough time for a society to change, for cause and effect to play out, and for kind of the novel, the upheavals of one series to become the underpinnings of the next one and allow for a new generation. And so I wanted to explore, what does Red London look like 7 years under Raimaresh's rule? What do Lila and Kel look like 7 years on to sharing space with each other? I wanted to explore how the underdog becomes the powerful, and then who the new underdogs are, what the new sense of upheaval is.
And you mentioned, this little piece of story that you left open, this little thread that you left open for a sequel series. It was very intentional.
Yes.
And fans were coming up being like, did you know this?
Yeah.
Was there, in any of your works, actually, would you say that everything is like very intentional? Or is there things pointed out to you like, I actually haven't thought of that before?
I would say that everything is fairly intentional because I'm an incredibly neurotic writer. There are writers out there who fly by the seat of their pants, who figure it out as they go. There is no shame in that. There is no right way to write, but it is wrong for me. My anxiety level of not knowing how things end would completely trump my ability to enjoy the process whatsoever. I like playing God. And what I mean is I like knowing the landscape of the world. I like knowing the characters well enough to predict exactly how they'll behave in certain situations. When a character changes its mind on the page from something that I would have told it to do, I see that as a need to stop and reassess my relationship with that character, because I don't see that as like a novel. Oh, how fun. The character did something I didn't expect. It's more like, where did you change? Like, where did you go wrong? Because I should know how you're going to behave. So everything's pretty intentional. There's a lot of Easter eggs in my books that are all very intentional, with the glaring exception that Alucard is not a vampire. And I named Alucard Emery because I just really like that name, and I had no idea that Alucard was Dracula backwards when I named him that. And apparently it's just a very well-known thing in vampire lore and TV shows and stories that Alucard is often the son of Dracula, and that it is Dracula backwards. And everyone was like, wait, are you going to introduce vampires in the Shades of Magic? And I'd always like stare at them blankly like, excuse me? Like there's no dragons, there's no vampires, there's none of this stuff. And they're like, well, because of Alucard. And I was like, oh no. Because at that point I didn't want to change his name, I just really liked it. The only other non-intentional thing is that Victor and Eli are named for me. And I didn't really think about that. My name is Victoria Elizabeth, and I wrote that book at a time when I didn't think anyone was ever going to read it, and so I just named these two halves of my personality as Victor and Eli. It seemed the right thing to do. And then my editor was the one who called attention to it. One day she was like, we're going to use your initials for this book, because it was my first adult novel, and I wanted to set it apart from my YA. And she was like, what's your middle initial? And I was like, oh, E. And she was like, what does that stand for? And I was like, oh, Elizabeth. And there was this really long silence on the line. And she was like, do you mean to tell me that you named your characters in this book after yourself? And I was like, oh no. And at that point, it was too late to change my name, and it was too late to change my characters. So I just kind of had to go with it. So aside from those two, everything has been intentional so far.
I would love to dive into the world you have built, specifically with Shades of Magic and now Fragile Threads of Power, because I love reading fantasy. Mm-hmm. I cannot fathom sitting down at a computer and trying to map out a world, like this big fantastical world. And obviously there's different types of fantasy. Sure. Yours very heavily involve magic. Mm-hmm. So I would love to know kind of how you conceived the idea of the Londons and how that all came about.
I too cannot imagine sitting down and mapping out an entire world. I am much more of, I'm going to use an analogy here and a mass generalization, which is I think there are kind of two different kinds of fantasy authors. There's like the Tolkien, who essentially is like, I'm going to build a house, I'm going to decorate every single square inch of every single room, I'm going to give you the keys to that house, and I'm going to let you explore, and if you don't find it on your travels, it does not exist. Like, I know the boundaries of the world. And then there's me, and I am the kind of fantasy author who says, okay, I'm going to build a house, and I'm going to decorate one room of that house in incredible detail. And I'm not actually going to give you the keys to the house. You're never going to get to go inside the house, but I'm going to part the curtains on a window, and you can stand outside and you can look in to the house and you can see that one room. And from that one room and how it's decorated, I want you to infer everything about the rest of the house. It's kind of like if you see a painting. Have you ever seen those paintings where the edges devolve back into sketches? I want to make like that. Not because I can't create the entire scope of the world, but because I want to create room for the imagination of the reader. I want to create room for you to paint in your mind as well. And there are some things that I want to dictate. I want to know the score that's playing in your mind while you read. I want you to know the color palette that you're seeing this scene. And I want it to be a movie that plays in your head. But when it comes down to the tiny nuanced details, every single corner of every single alley of every single street in that world, I am not painting like that. I am painting with inference and with assumption. And I think that gives me freedom too, because it allows me to introduce a character like Alucard Emery in Gathering of Shadows, who can see the threads of magic which would go on to be the thing that sets Tess apart in Fragile Threads of Power as well. Now, up until that point that you have met Alucard, you have never met a character who could see the threads of magic. And yet, it shouldn't feel impossible. Because of the world that I created in book 1, it should feel like a natural extension. Like I opened the door at the back of that room that I decorated, and now you can see a little bit of the hall, and it still matches. If Alucard Emery had ridden a dragon, shit would have been weird, right? Because you would have been like, I'm not really sure if I would have put a dragon in this house based on what you told me. And so it's about figuring out what you can do to extend the parameters of your world in organic ways that feel in keeping with what you've already done. But I definitely leave myself room to play and to grow book by book by book.
And I find it very interesting that you hit on the point very specifically of Tolkien fantasy, because I believe I had heard you once say before, like, there are two types of fantasy, where there's Tolkien and like Tolkien kids and Narnia.
Lewis. Yeah.
Narnia kids.
Yeah. The other thing about Tolkien is that, not to use like two dead white guys, but like they do make really nice pedestals for these 2 points, which is that with Tolkien, you will never access Middle Earth. You can't, except through the pages of those books. You cannot go there. You cannot be part of it. But C.S. Lewis teaches you that somewhere in your house is a cabinet with no back. And so you, as a child or as an adult, spend your time looking for the cabinet with no back, because what C.S. Lewis is saying is that magic can come into your world, that you actually can access magic. And that's the kind of fantasy I want to write, or the fantastical that I want to write, which is that I want to convince you that magic is real. Or I at least want to convince you to doubt that magic is not. Because it turns out I don't actually need you to believe in magic. I just need to create a sliver of doubt in your concept of reality. And one of my favorite examples of this is actually with Vicious. About a year after Vicious came out, Vicious, for those who don't know, is a supervillain story. It's basically like Professor X and Magneto had a really toxic bromance in college and tried to discover the key to superpowers, and they were near-death experiences, and then they set out to manufacture their own abilities by controlling their own suicides and resurrections. Super light, right? Okay, so I had a reader, a guy, I'm gonna just I have a mental image of him, it's totally inference on my part, but definitely a guy with a normal job in his 40s who messaged me at 4 a.m. one day, right after finishing Vicious, and he was like, hey, I know this is probably not true, but I kind of just need to know for sure. There's no documented evidence for this kind of superpower, right? And he was dead serious. He was like, I have read the book and I am now just questioning whether this kind of ability, which is an extension of a medical science that I then just tipped over the ledge into fantasy, whether that could be real. That dude could not sleep. That email was sent at 4 a.m. It was bothering him. He was pretty sure it wasn't real, but he kind of needed confirmation. That's a success. That's all I want to do, is just make you wonder, because I think it's not about making you wholesale believe in magic. It's just simply making you doubt what you already know. That's the kind of fantasy I want to tell.
And speaking of magic, in the Londons very specifically, there isn't even a single way of how magic is used or seen. Some Londons, there's vibrant magic. Others, it's sad, there's no magic around. So I understand it might be kind of hard to ask, what was your favorite to dive into? But I'm also wondering, of each of them, what did you enjoy approaching about it?
Oh, what a great question. I love that I built the magic in conversation with the world and with the power system. So basically 4 Londons, and what differs between them is their relationship to power. So you have the magic in Grey London, in our London, which is a world where it's been forgotten, where we have fallen out of touch. Our linguistic commonality is gone, right? You have the magic of Red London, which thrives because it believes that the magic and the people must rise together like ships on the water. You have the magic of White London, which is incredibly brutalist and incredibly kind of toxic and violent because it believes that power must be taken. It's something taken by force and held by force. And so the magic in conversation with the people in that world is something that must be bound to you, must be forced to obey you. It isn't willing. And then you have the magic of Black London, which was so expansive and so powerful that people let it into their minds and hearts, and it consumed everything. And so what I was really excited by was not even just creating different aesthetic versions of magic, different landscapes for magic, but specifically looking at how magic changes based on the wielder. Because magic, I never really connected with Superman. And the reason was there was no limit, right? It's like kind of like Dragon Ball Z, right? Where you just like keep leveling up and leveling up and leveling up and you become a Saiyan and a Super Saiyan and like super Saiyan. Like it's just continuous up power. I want there to be a give and take. I want there to be a trade. And I think magic needs to be in conversation with people. And it's not actually that I limited magic in any of the worlds, but I limited what people were capable of doing with it, because the people become the vessel for power. So it wasn't about saying that there's a finite amount of power, but there is a finite amount that a person can handle, can do with it. And so again, it all comes back to people. Whether you're writing realism, whether you're writing high fantasy, whether you're writing Addie LaRue and it's very grounded New York and Paris fantasy, it's all about humans. It's all about people and how we handle power, the ways in which we fail to handle it and the ways in which we succeed. So I think no matter the scope or the scale of the story I'm telling, I just really want it to be about people.
And so you want it to be about people, and that's kind of how you go about creating the magic. And that's something that I specifically want to touch upon is I know I've talked about like, sitting down to create the world,
Yeah.
but you're also sitting down and creating a power system that all works together. Can you maybe talk about how you kind of figured that out and then are able to make it go from brain to page?
Oh, I have no idea how anything gets from brain to page. That's the hardest part. No, I think I believe welcome to my TED Talk about power and fantasy and realism. I think as a fantasy author, every step that we ask the reader to take away from reality is a step we risk losing somebody, because it's hard. So my goal as a writer is to take the fewest number of steps possible, and that comes down to the imagery as well. When I talk about magic, if I don't give you a visual model that you already understand, I'm going to lose some of you. And so even when it comes to designing magical systems, I will always ground it in an analogy or a metaphor or imagery that I know you understand. So I will say, think of magic like a tree. It has many branches and many roots. Think of magic like a house. It has a foundation and it has floors and it has walls. Think of magic like XYZ. So what I'm actually doing is picking a totally mundane, realistic object, realistic concept, and then hanging my fantasy on it. So I'm never asking you to imagine something wholesale. I'm asking you to imagine something natural. And because of that, I also will always tie my magic, whatever shape it takes, to the natural world. In Vicious, it will be medicine. In Shades of Magic and Threads of Power, it will be nature. It's elemental. It's all based on the elements because you interact with elements on a daily basis. You might not interact with magic that you know of on a daily basis, but you do interact with water and earth and air. You interact with alchemy, with the combination of ingredients and the changing of ingredients, and that's all that magic is.
And with your books, there's such a variety in terms of what you've written. And I believe in New York, we talked about, kind of not putting yourself in this bubble. You were like, I'm going to keep creating weird.
Yeah.
And I hope that they like it.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't able to expand on it then, but I would love to expand on it now and say, was that a choice you made very, very early on where you're like, starting out, I could go this one route and keep writing this, and if it works, it works, or if it was, I'm just going to throw it at the wall and see how much weird I can get out there?
I don't think I thought of it like that. I think it was a combination of factors. Like in some ways, I'm so grateful. If any of you have heard me speak before, you've heard me speak about kind of my long road, right? I'm 15 years in now, 24 books in, and I had the benefit of what is a blessing and a curse, which is that when I was starting out in publishing, I did not get a lot of support. And when you don't get a lot of support from the publishers, that means there's not very much risk. Like if a publisher had given me $1 million for my debut novel, I probably would have felt hewn in. I would have felt bound to continue writing a one specific thing, but my publishers didn't. They didn't really care. And I'm somebody whose imagination goes in many different directions. And so for me, it wasn't intentional in the beginning. My very first novel was a fairy tale about a village where a stranger arrives and then the children begin to disappear one by one by one. My next novel was about a library where the dead were shelved like books. After that, it was supervillains. after that, it was Shades of Magic, it was City of Ghosts, it was The Savage Song. They're all totally different. That's just because that's how my imagination works. But it wasn't intentional. I do think, though, it was enduring in a really interesting way. It gave me a freedom to play because I wasn't bound into one thing, and because the audience, small as it was in the beginning and grand as it is now, because it came with me book after book after book, what it did was hold space for me to play. It wasn't a fandom built around one thing. It wasn't an audience that had only come with me because of one trilogy. It was an audience that had space for me because they said, okay, look, she's gonna be weird. And the weird is gonna be different every single book, and I might not connect with all of the weird all of the time. But I feel like you readers have given me such a gift because you've had respect for letting me try different things, for letting that spotlight shift just a little bit with every book and highlight a different version of myself. And I think that it was never intentional, but now I'm really grateful for it. Like, I just go where my stories take me. Like, I get bored very easily, and I want to try something new each time. I want to push myself in new ways each and every time. And that's hard, and it's daunting. And I mean, I'll never forget, in the lead up to Addie LaRue. Addie LaRue, for those who don't know, is my 20th novel. And in the lead up to Addie, I was like, oh, great. This one book will be the death of my entire career. Like, watch me. I have written 19 fantasy novels, and here's this weird, quiet, literary deal with the devil. That's just, it's a character novel. And when I say character novel versus plot novel, it's just really internal conflict versus external conflict. Addie LaRue has a plot. Shades of Magic has character, but it's the guiding force of each one. Addie LaRue is a book about identity. It is a book about turning a certain age and feeling like you're supposed to know who you are at that moment, as if the clock ticks and suddenly you become whole. And Shades of Magic is a book about a stone across multiple Londons and a chase. It's also about identity, but that's not its headline. So plot novel, the headline is external conflict. Character novel, the headline is internal conflict. I had written 19 plot novels, and then I wrote Addie, and I was like already apologizing to my publisher because I was like, this is going to be weird, and it's probably not going to go well, and I'm so sorry, it's going to be the death of my career. So then Addie comes out. Spoiler, not the death of my career. And then I had the exact opposite problem. I gained about 1 million new readers with Addie who hadn't already been there, and then they all turned to me and said, another. And I said, oh no, I so hate to break this to you. I will never do that again. That was 1/20th of my identity. And oops. And I definitely had about a 6-month period where I felt, for the very first time, a sense of pressure to repeat myself. While I knew that I couldn't. You cannot repeat yourself. That way lies madness. And so the next thing I wrote, I almost forced myself out of it by writing Gallant. I was like, well, no matter what I write after Addie, it can't be like Addie. And if I try to make it like Addie, that will be a disservice both to the story, to myself, and to the readers. So we got to go back to business. We got to write weird again. And so I wrote this story about a nonverbal protagonist skirting the line between life and death, between human and the ghouls on the other side of a wall that you can walk around in daytime but not at night. Like, it was a fairy tale. So books 1 and 21 were fairy tales. It was a homecoming, but it was also a declaration to myself and to my readers. The weird can't stop just because you have this kind of success with one of these books. So there are days when it is hard and when I get in my head and when I think, oh, I should just stay in a lane. But if I had wanted to just stay in a lane, I would have just continued writing Shades of Magic. Like, up until Addie, that was my most successful series by numbers alone. And so I think I'm just really antagonistic towards measurements like that. I'm antagonistic towards fear and towards success and towards all of it. And so I just do the only thing I know how to do, which is just put my head down and tell myself a story.
And so for my next question, I want to ask about your process. And very specifically, as a creative, I feel like creativity can strike at any moment.
Sure.
And I know that you're very organized, and so you have everything mapped out and you're like sitting down and you're writing, but what do you do when you're like maybe out and about and just something comes to you? Do you write it down, or do you very much try to, in your certain periods where you're writing it out, keep it in that?
I write it down and then I do nothing, because I think that I don't know how many of you have heard the concept of the shiny new idea. It's a writer's term that basically is like, okay, you'll be 100 pages into the thing you're working on, you will invariably get a shiny new idea. The shiny new idea says, work on me instead. The thing you're doing is boring. Nobody cares. Look at this shiny new idea. But that's actually, it's like clockwork. And the reason it's like clockwork is as you write, the thing that you are creating becomes less novel to you because you are getting to know it. The shine must wear off of the thing that you are writing for you to write it. You have to get to know the story. As you get to know the story, you get to know its flaws. It's less exciting, it's less novel, it's less new, and that's how the shiny new idea gets in. But the shiny new idea will repeat the exact same process. Say that you give up the thing you're writing now and you follow the shiny new idea. 100 pages in, you're gonna get a shiny new idea. And that shiny new idea is gonna be like, the thing you're writing now is boring. Nobody cares, follow me. And that is how many writers never finish a book.
It's like a never-ending cycle.
It is a never-ending cycle that your brain is trying to trick you. And I have learned not to listen to my tricksy brain. And so what I do is I take that shiny new idea and I put it away. And I come back to it when I'm done with the thing that I'm working on and I see how shiny it actually is. Sometimes it is very shiny. If it is shiny enough, if it is actually shiny, right? If it is silver or gold and not some kind of imitation metal, it will still be shiny when you come back to it. In fact, it'll be shinier because it will be your back brain, your subconscious will have been polishing it, will have been working on it. So you might come back to it 6 months later and it's actually worth writing. Or you might come back to it 6 months later and it's not actually a shiny new idea, it was just a distraction. And I like to force my ideas to wait 6 months to a year anyway, one, because of my schedule, but also because I think if it can't wait 6 months, it's never gonna survive 6 years, or however long it takes me to actually get it from page to bookshelf. So it has to show me that it has the caliber to endure, to merit me investing in it, instead of just letting it distract me.
And now you have a new novel coming out next year,
Yes.
Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about this?
It's so scary, guys. It's so scary. Okay, so Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. So after Addie LaRue, I went into a really, really deep depression because it was gone. And you have to understand, it wasn't just that this book came out and it was successful. Addie took 10 years of my life, from age 22 to age 32. And what that meant was the entire 10 years, I had a friend. I had this fictional friend who lived in my head, who was a passenger on the ride that I was on. And I would check with her every time I went somewhere, every time I saw something wonderful. I would ask myself, how would Addie see this? How would she interpret it? How would she live it? So for 10 years, I had a fictional best friend. And then when that book was done, I had to put it away. And suddenly I didn't have Addie in my life anymore. And I was really, really sad. It wasn't just the sadness of what if I never write another book like Addie LaRue. That was maybe 10% of the sadness. And the 90% was, I'm lonely without this person that I got to have in my head for a little while, for a third of my life. And so I kept staring at this open grave left behind by Addie LaRue, by the book. I had dug this book out, right, from my head. And now I just had this open plot, and I kept trying to throw things into it to make them grow. I kept trying to make a story grow in Addie's wake. And I don't know how many of you are writers, but if you try to force a story, it will not come. You end up with really dumb ideas. And you just get mad at yourself, and you hate yourself because your brain, which is supposed to be your greatest ally, is just an enemy now. It's just another enemy. And so I was in this really dark depression, and it wasn't until I stopped trying to plant things. I went back to my work. I wrote Threads of Power. I worked on other things. And then one day, when I stopped trying to plant things in that grave, I noticed something growing up from beneath it, as if I had planted something long before Addie, and it just needed time to grow. And that idea was Bury Our Bones. And I'm very careful about what I say about it, because I actually just want you to have a really blank experience. I don't want to dictate it, but I will say that it is about 3 young women over the course of 500 years. Its nickname in my head and in my life is Toxic Lesbian Vampires. It is Addie's feral older sister. I know it's technically her younger sister in publication order, but it feels like her feral older sister. It is, if Addie LaRue is a book about immortality and hope, this is a book about immortality and hunger. It's specifically about the amount of space that young women, specifically queer young women, are told they're allowed to take up in the world, and what happens when you want more, what happens when you're not satisfied with being told not to want, not to hunger, not to strive, not to need. It is about the constant need for apology. And this is a book about these 3 young queer women, but it is not just a book, obviously, for queer women. It is a book for anyone who feels like they have been told to make themselves smaller, to make themselves more palatable. For many, many years, I tried to make my queerness smaller. I tried to be like the kind of lesbian that wouldn't offend. That was just, oh, but don't worry, it's just such a small part of my work. You won't even notice it. And I just got so tired of apologizing. And I wanted to write a book about people who get tired of apologizing. And I also really wanted to write a lesbian villain. And for so long in publishing, I didn't feel it was possible, because if you wrote queerness and villainy together in a character, everyone said that you were trying to conflate the two, that what you were saying was actually that queerness was villainous. Instead of what I was trying to say, which is that queer characters and queer people should be allowed to have the same amount of complexity that their straight counterparts do. That I didn't just want to be a hero in a story, and I didn't want to just be on the page because the plot demanded it. I hated this concept that queerness only got to exist in the book if it was needed for the plot. I had an editor early on for a project ask me why the character needed to be gay instead of straight if it never had a bearing on the story. And that's because it's just so programmed into us that the default should be one way. Ooh, that's all right. I always have to check my phone at the beginning because it would be me. It has been me before. So that's just to say that I wanted to have queer villains and queer heroes and queer messy people. So the 3 women at the heart of this sometimes move in heroic ways and sometimes move in villainous ways, but mostly they move in extremely, extremely human ways. So yes, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil is the only way I can think to describe it is if Addie and Vicious had a book child.
I know you're a bit limited in what you're able to say about it, but thank you so much for sharing what you could.
Basically, vibes. I can tell you vibes. I shall tell you nothing of the plot. We shall talk of the plot in a year's time. But right
when you've
now,
all read it.
Yes, please read it. Please buy it. Please support this very, very loud queer story. I have written many quiet queer stories, and I really wanted to write a loud one. And I'm really, really lucky to be at a part of my career where I feel like I can do this, and the publisher and the audience will support this, because this is the kind of story that for somebody else or at a different stage in their career would not get the kind of support that this story is getting. And I'm really hoping that by creating toxic lesbian vampires that get to be mainstream successful, that other queer stories get pushed less and less to the fringes.
And now I think we'd like to go to some fan questions. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll have a microphone that is coming around.
No pressure.
Oh, right here.
Brave souls, thank you.
In the orange sweater.
Hi.
Hi. So I've had this question for a while. You have to be locked in a room with one of your characters for 24 hours. It's a magic-proof room and a power-proof room, but they know that you are their creator. The objective is to survive. Who do you pick?
This is an incredible question.
Thank you.
You know, the problem with my characters is I did make all of them, and I am like many of them, but I don't necessarily want to spend time with many of them. I would probably say Luke, because I actually just think it would be good chat. And I think like he couldn't hurt, like there's no danger there. Like we probably would just bond over art and culture and things of beauty. So, you know, I have 3 autobiographical characters at this point. You've had an opportunity to meet 2 of them, which is Henry Strauss from Addie LaRue and Victor Vale from Vicious. My 3rd autobiographical character is Sabine, who is one of the 3 women in Bury Our Bones, but you can't meet her yet. But I definitely wouldn't want to be in a room with any of the 3 women from Bones. And I wouldn't want to be in a room with Victor, even without powers, just because I think that's just like being in a room with a mirror, but a really bad one. Like it's not the most positive iteration of myself. But Luke, I just think we'd vibe. Like Luke and I, the devil and I could get along pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to pit Victor, but I thought he would only go about 4 hours before he was like, this is enough. This is too much time without Sydney.
I was
got to
going to
get out of
say,
here.
the problem is Victor wouldn't say anything. Victor would sit in that room with you for 12 hours and just make you feel progressively more uncomfortable with the fact that you are still in this room. And like he has no need to like mirror, right, to mimic in that situation. He would just sit there and it would make me very uncomfortable.
Thank you. Please
Yes.
write Villains free.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone
Next.
else?
Any others? Yeah.
I kind of don't want to follow that question.
No.
With the Shades of Magic trilogy, obviously the 4 different colours of London, and black, white and grey are a progression on a scale. Was it always red that was the other London, or did you play about with other colours and then land on red?
That's a great question. I found a notebook a few years ago where I was clearly playing with other colors because it was like blue London, ? Green London, ? None of it felt right. Part of it's just, I mean, this is my color palette. But no, I am a very visual storyteller, and often there will be kind of a still frame or a still shot in my head that is the origin for the story. Sometimes I won't even realize what story it's for. And the very first image that I ever had in my mind before I ever knew it was for Shades of Magic was a young man walking through a wall and colliding with a girl dressed as a boy. And he was wearing a red coat. And the still frame in my mind was in black and white. So it was just all kind of grayscale, and the only pop of color was Kel's coat. And so I had that image in my mind of what would become a chapter in A Darker Shade of Magic, the collision between Kel and Lila Bard in Grey London. But I had that image like a year and a half before I had the story idea. I often will think of my stories as ingredients in a meal. Like people will be like, oh, where do you get your ideas from? And I'm like, well, I get ingredients, but I don't really get ideas. The idea is the meal. And so often I'll get ingredients for my stories out of order. And so for that one, I had that visual. That was one of the visuals that I had that was just an ingredient before I realized, oh, he's not walking through a door, he's walking through the wall. And he's not walking through the wall, he's walking through the world. But it was always black and white and gray, and then that pop of red. So it just felt natural. Anyone else?
Yes, right over there.
We're getting braver.
Hello.
Hi.
What would be your advice for someone that's, like, for example, I've got a book that's ready to write, but how do you get over the intimidation of writing it? Like, you've got it planned out, you're excited to write it, but the idea of sitting there and actually doing it terrifies you.
Oh, I know this feeling so well. I have two prongs of advice. One is to know your ending. Not just the concept of the ending. Have an ending that you're so excited to get to that on bad days it will keep you from quitting, and on good days it will motivate you to get there. My ending is the whole reason that I write a story. I look at a story like Gallant, and the final scene at the piano is the reason that I wrote that entire book. That was the still frame that was in my mind, but then every piece of theme and motif and plot was leading towards. The other thing I do is I make it as small as humanly possible. When I break a book and then I sit down to write it, I don't tell myself I'm writing a book. If I told myself I was sitting down to write a book, I would never write a single sentence. That is way too mountainous a task. Instead, I sit down to work on an individual moment, to bring a moment to life, whether that means working out of order, working on a single line or a single paragraph. My new hack for perfectionism, this is recent in the last couple books as my perfectionism has gotten worse, is that I will lie to myself and say that I'm not actually writing a chapter, I'm just outlining it. It's incredible. I think Donna Tartt will write by hand and will scribble at the top of the page to make the page seem less daunting. Now the page has been marred. That's basically what I'm doing. So basically, because I'm a plotter, a pretty extreme planner, I have like a 4-sentence summary of the scene that I want to write. So I stick that at the top of a Word document page, and then I just start building it out. So those 4 sentences become 8 sentences, become 12 sentences. And, oh, maybe I thought of a line of dialogue that would be really nice in the scene. I just put it in. Maybe I thought of a single line of description that would just be really nice transition between these 2 moments. I just put it in. And so what you do is you trick your brain, because your brain doesn't think you're writing a chapter. Your brain thinks I'm planning a chapter. And at some point, invariably, you will slide from planning into writing.
Thank you.
I actually want to follow up real quick what you said about the ending and having the ending that you're very, very excited about. For you, do you purposely maybe try to wait to write your ending and not just like go for it first?
Oh, I don't write out of order. So like I plan the whole story. And then I might like pick up a new scene if I'm really stuck on another one, because it's more important that I don't lose momentum, but I don't actually draft the ending until I get to the ending. But I know exactly what it is. And 25 books in, the endings have never changed, no matter how much the book has. Because to me, again, the ending is the point. And I will not actually start drafting a book until I have the ending that I know is worth telling the story. Because for me, a book could take anywhere from a year to 10 years. That ending has to keep me going for that entire time. And sometimes the endings are contentious. It took about 5 years of the 10 years of Addie LaRue to find the ending. And a lot of people would argue it's not the ending. It's not. It is the ending, though, that I choose, that you don't get to follow the story anymore. It's the ending where you leave them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is anyone else? Yes, right over here.
Here, front row.
I feel like I'm quoting someone, but I can't for the life of me remember who it is. But the idea that when you put a story out into the world, it becomes even more of a different thing that throughout the different people who read it. So I was wondering, have you ever had an interpretation or someone who's read your books and come up with something so different to how you pictured it writing it, and it really surprised you?
Ooh, I think the closest thing is I've had people have like theories. And there was like one theory that I really wish I had done, and then I tried to see if I could make it work, like retcon it, but I just couldn't. And I don't really like to take credit for theories that aren't mine. But so I will do a tiny spoiler. It's not a tiny spoiler, but a theory that came about for Vengeful was that June is Angie. And that's like a great idea. I really wish I thought of that. Angie's dead. So like it would have been really nice. Had I given June a different backstory, we could have hacked it. And oh my God, it's been Angie the whole time. And she's been like tracking Victor and Eli. It was brilliant, but it's not the idea that I had. So I can't take credit for it. So my stories don't exist. Like it's not a Sanderson verse kind of thing. Is it called a Cosmere? It's not the Cosmere. I would say that all of my stories, a couple of them exist in the same world. We'll see. I'll tell you, there is the smallest Easter egg in the history of the world, but Addie and Bones are set in the same universe, and there is a crossover. There is an Easter egg of Addie in Bury Our Bones. So that's intentional. I will take credit for that. But often it'll be like kind of groupings. Like I saw an incredible fan theory about like the order of Shades of Magic and like this Savage song and City of Ghosts as they like all existed in the same timeline, and that certain things about Black London had then made the monsters they're brilliant, but no, I'm not that clever. I only work on the books that I work on, and I'm not that cool. But generally, no, I think that I try really hard to make the same movie play in my reader's head. And I always think it's such a thrill then when I see fan art, because I'll see fan art from 100 different creators and Kel always looks like Kel. I'm like, how did you do that? I didn't know what Kel looked like, but everyone knew what Kel looked like. Everyone knew what Lila looked like. So I see it as just like an incredible gift, but also love that we're having some kind of shared hallucination. So time for one more?
Yeah, we have time for one more question. And then for anyone who still wanted to ask a question, are you signing?
I am. I'm signing right after this. Please come down and hang out with me. I don't know what it's called. The autographing tables downstairs. Some of you have seen me there already. So and it's my final signing of the con, and then I will go be a goblin for the next several months. So this is my last time wearing makeup until the end of the year. Please come see me. Last question. How are you going to pick?
Ooh, I saw this hand, so.
With the hat.
Right here. Is this right?
With the hat.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit, first part is a thank you.
Sure.
And second part is a question itself. So I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Yeah.
I love the way that you approach not peeking behind the curtain of technique, but ripping it down and sharing your experiences with it. So the thanks really is demystifying how much time to put into a creative day.
Yeah.
Like something that you've had with your guests throughout was like 3 to 5 hours before you emptied out.
Yeah.
And as a writer, hearing that and understanding, I don't have to try and force this out, major game changer for me.
Great.
So thank you to you and all your guests for really piercing that through and changing the way I try to approach my creative process.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
And the second question ties directly into the theme of this. Will there be more seasons coming out in the future? And I hope that the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, thank you so much, love. For those who don't know, I run a podcast called No Right Way, along with Jenna, my producer, who's also here, right there in the corner. Yeah. And it started during the pandemic, right? Because I just wanted to. A lot of writers will come up to me asking for prescriptive advice. I don't believe in prescriptive advice, and I think what you're really asking for, what we're all really asking for, is like the right order, the process, the assurance that if we just follow a certain step, we'll get there. And I wish I could give you that, and I can't. But what I can tell you is that we're all struggling in the same exact way, and we're all going through the same things, and that we all sit down and are faced with a blank page. And so I specifically sat down with really successful writers to ask them how they do what they do. And probably my favorite parts of the season are when I violently disagree, like viscerally. There's a episode with Sarah El-Arifi this season, and she has the exact opposite process to me, and you can hear my anxiety climbing over the course of this episode. Like, I'm starting to get like tight-chested in the episode because she's talking about how much of a pantser she is. It's so much fun, and it's so special, and it's also really helpful to me to like hear from my colleagues and my other authors who are functioning with that level of pressure, that they're struggling in different ways. And I love hearing what works for them. There will definitely be more seasons. I think the third season will be probably February, March, April, or March, April, May, because Bones comes out in June. And so, we're constantly evolving the show. So I think each season feels a little bit different. But I think if you have suggestions of authors that you haven't heard yet or that you want to have on, always DM me. Let me know, because I do tend to reach out to people that I'm either just big fans of. Like this season, I had like R.L. Stine and Alex Edelman, who's like a Tony and Emmy winner, and also like Sabaa Tahir, who is here today, is just extraordinary, and I love it. It's a huge amount of work, but selfishly, it's also a massive creative well filler. So you can find that anywhere. It's called No Right Way if you haven't listened to it. But I'm so glad that it helped. And also, yeah, it's also a really important reminder that like most of us, we have like an hour to 4 hours basically a day that we're creating. You don't have to hit some kind of threshold. I do measure time, not word count, because when I was measuring word count, I felt like there was just this immense pressure to get to like 2,000 words, even if I had written 1,800 great ones and the quality would fall off. Also, some days you don't write, you just think or delete or spend time, and that time is just as valuable as the time you are typing. So I hope if you listen to it, you get good things out of it like that, and I hope it inspires you to keep going.
Thank you.
Victoria, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being with us here today. Thank you for sharing your experience as well as your writing.
Yeah.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all so much.